Hello, Nisna West Sunday School kids and some other kids who may be listening. I've decided now, beginning this week, that I am going to begin a 5-part series of a story, a visualized story that I think that you will all enjoy. I'll tell you chapter 1 today, and then over the next 4 weeks, we'll continue the story, and you'll learn about a young boy named Hamid. The story is called No Darkness at All, and it's based on a story written by a woman named Patricia M. St. John. And as I tell you the story, I'm going to show you pictures here about the boy Hamid. The memory verse, the verse that the story reminds us about, is this verse from 1 John chapter 1, verse 5. It says, "This then is the message which we have heard of him, and declare unto you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all." At the beginning of our story, I'd like to introduce you here to Hamid. Hamid is an 11-year-old boy here, as you see here in the blue shirt. He lives in the African country of Morocco, way up north in the continent of Africa, in the country of Morocco. Hamid is 11 years old. And as you can see, his job is to look after the goats that his family owns. One afternoon, Hamid was sitting out in the fields watching the goats, and as he watched the goats, his mind was thinking about all the differences that had happened to his family in the last 2 years. Sadly, 2 years ago, Hamid's dad had passed away, leaving just his mom and his baby sister, Kenza, and Hamid. After his dad passed away, his mom remarried, and so he had a stepfather. And he lived with his stepfather, his mom, and his stepfather had another wife, an older lady who also was in the house. And Hamid didn't really like his stepfather and stepmother. They weren't very kind to him, and he didn't think that his mom was very happy either. There was something not quite right. And Hamid couldn't really figure out what it was, but he had noticed that his mom wasn't too happy the last few weeks. While he was daydreaming and thinking about his life, 2 of the little goats started to run away and leave the herd. And Hamid looked up and realized he better go catch the goats before they went away and he'd never catch them. But just as he was going to go catch the goats, he heard a voice calling, "Hamid, Hamid!" And he looked over. And there, running down the hill, was one of his good friends, coming to Hamid, running as fast as he could and calling Hamid's name. "Oh no," said Hamid. "What is wrong? I wonder why he's coming. There must be something wrong with my family." His friend came to him, and by the time he reached Hamid, he was out of breath, and he tried to stop and catch his breath, and Hamid said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And the boy said, "I must look after your goats. Your mother wants you to come immediately, Hamid. Go and meet her at the well. She has a message for you, and she told me for you to come immediately." Hamid handed his friend the stick to look after the goats, and away he went. He climbed up the hill and met his mom by the well, just as his friend had told him to. And when he met his mom, he noticed that she had 2 buckets in one hand, and tied on her back was his little sister, Kenza. His mom said to him, "Here, Hamid, take the buckets quickly, hide them in the bushes, and follow me. We must move quickly. The other wife, your stepmother, is going to know that we're gone, and we must hurry." Hamid followed his mom. He couldn't understand why she was in such a rush, but he followed her. They climbed up the hill, and his mom stopped. His mom took little Kenza off her back and put her down on her lap. Then she said to Hamid, "Look at your sister, Hamid. Show her some flowers." So Hamid picked some flowers and showed them to Kenza. Kenza didn't make any noise or didn't even think that she had looked at the flowers. Hamid smiled at her. So he smiled at his sister, but Kenza didn't smile back. "Hamid, move your fingers in front of Kenza's face." So Hamid did this in front of Kenza's face, and Kenza did nothing. Suddenly, Hamid understood. Mother Is Kenza blind? Can she not see my fingers? Hamid, your sister is blind. I have thought that she might have been blind for several months, but I didn't want to say anything. But yes, Hamid, she's blind. We must go. We must pray to the saints and to those who have passed on ahead of us and ask them to heal your sister, Hamid. Follow me. Hamid followed his mom up to the cave where people stopped and prayed to the saints, and his mom started to pray, "Oh, saints, please, please heal my daughter. Please have mercy on my daughter." And then she went back and looked at Kenza, but Kenza's eyes were still blind. Hamid did not understand that you can't pray to saints. God doesn't tell us to pray to saints. In order to know the truth of God's word and that Jesus is the light of the world, we must pray to God alone. And Jesus came to be the light of the world when he came and died on the cross and then was buried and rose from the tomb. But Hamid had never heard of Jesus and never heard that Jesus is the light of the world. All he knew was that Kenza was blind and she would live in darkness. Hamid was scared of darkness. People had told him that evil spirits came when it was dark, and Hamid believed them. He was afraid and he was sad for his sister. But they knew they had to hurry. He returned with his mom to the well, filled up the buckets of water. She went back home, and Hamid went and got the goats back from his friend. When he reached his friend, he gave his friend some bread and water as a thank you for looking after the goats. Then he left and herded the goats and brought them home at supper time. When he got near his house, he heard an angry voice. And when he entered the house, there was the older stepmom, and she had grabbed little Kenza and said to Hamid's mom, "There's something wrong. There's something wrong. I know there's something wrong with this baby. You're hiding it from me. Give me the child." And she grabbed little Kenza. The older lady touched Kenza's face, her arms, her legs. "What was wrong with this child? I know you're hiding something from me. Someone told me that you were at the tomb for the saints and were praying. What is wrong with this child?" And then the old lady realized Kenza's eyes looked funny. They didn't look like yours and my eyes. And she said, "I know what's wrong. Kenza is blind. Is that the secret?" And Hamid's mom shook her head. "Yes, it is true, but please don't tell our husband. Please, please." "Aha, I will tell him. You're hiding this secret from him." That night, when the stepfather came home for supper, Hamid was scared. What would happen? His stepfather came in, and he thought for sure that the older lady would tell the stepfather that Kenza was blind. But instead, his stepfather said in a deep voice, "Let us eat." They brought the food to them, and everyone sat on the floor. They each had pieces of bread, and they dipped their bread in the big pot and ate their supper together. After supper was over, the older lady said to the husband, "Do you know what's wrong with little Kenza?" The father said, "No, what are you talking about? There's nothing wrong." She picked up the baby and brought Kenza to him and showed him, "Look, look, what is wrong with him?" At first he couldn't see anything wrong with her. Then she said, "Look at her eyes, look at her eyes." And when he did, he understood that Kenza was blind. "She's blind." Hamid sat there. He waited. He thought that his stepfather would be very angry. But instead he stopped. The man stopped and he thought. He said, "A blind child could bring us much money. It may not be a bad thing that Kenza is blind." "What do you mean?" said Hamid. "A blind child can bring us money." "I have a plan. There is a man who begs in our village every market day. 1 day a week is market day. And the blind beggar begs for money. If we take Kenza to him and hire her out, she can earn us money by begging." And so that was the plan. Very soon after that, once a week on market day, Hamid's job was to take his little sister, Kenza. She wasn't even 2 years old. He had to carry her on his back down to the market, and this is the blind beggar. They would sit by the side of the road from early in the morning, around 8 o'clock, until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, sitting and begging, please give us money, give us money. And when people saw little Kenza, they had compassion on her and would give money. The blind beggar got to keep some of the money. But if you were just a small child, would you like to sit for 8 hours a day begging with a stranger? Kenza did not enjoy this experience, but this was the plan. They would get money from Kenza. Hamid would try to keep an eye on his sister throughout the day as he could, but every afternoon he would go back for her just before 4 o'clock, when the sound would sound for the people to go to the call of prayer. He knew it was time for Kenza to finish with the beggar. Hamid loved his little sister, and he tried to get a treat for her. So some days he would buy her a little piece of fried donut ring and would bring it to her. And at 4 o'clock, when the call to prayer sounded for the people there, he would pick up Kenza and put her on his back and give her the little donut to eat as he took her home. He would do this week after week after week. Little Kenza loved her brother Hamid, and she knew that he loved her. This went on, like I said, for several weeks, until one night when Hamid was in bed, he was awakened by the sound of people talking. He looked over, and there in the corner of the room was his stepfather, the older lady, and his mom. And his mom was crying. They were talking in quiet voices, but he knew his mom was crying. And he tried to listen. And the stepfather said, "This is the plan. The beggar is leaving our town, and he has agreed to buy Kenza from us, and he will take her away and look after her, and we will not have to look after a blind child anymore." Hamid's mom said, "No, you cannot sell my baby. You cannot send her away with that beggar." The older steplady said, "It doesn't matter. A blind child is better dead to us than alive. Sell her and get her away. Then we won't have to care for her." But Hamid's mom kept saying, "Please, no, she's my baby. Please, no, I will look after her. Don't do that." And the stepfather said, "We will decide for sure tomorrow, but I'm thinking that I will sell Kenza to the beggar. Let's stop talking for now and go to bed." Hamid lay there. He heard the story. There was no way he was going to let his little sister be sold, but he didn't want to upset his stepfather. So he lay quietly until he heard both his stepfather and stepmother falling asleep. Then he climbed out of bed quietly, went over to his mom and said, Mother, I heard the plan to sell Kenza. We can't sell Kenza. Mom, I can't let my sister be sold. What are we going to do?" And his mom sat there with tears coming down her face and said, "Hamid, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do. We need to think of a plan." Hamid said, "I don't know either, but there is no way I'm going to let my sister, my little sister who only sees darkness, I will not let her be sold." And this is where we're going to leave Hamid and his mom at this part of the story. I'm going to leave you here now, and next week when we come back, we're going to find out what's going to happen to little Kenza. Will Hamid and his mom be able to figure out a plan to save her and so that she will not have to be sold to the beggar? Will Hamid learn more about Jesus and how Jesus is the light of the world? You must come back next week and join me, and we'll find out more.